Hello, everybody. I'm going to be moderating this panel. And thanks for coming in today. As Rebecca said, we recently announced that the Institute of Play is closing, and we wanted to have a session here at the Games for Change. Sorry, winding down. We said we were going to monitor our language because closing sounds so final. But we're, I don't know, transitioning to a new phase of existence, which is winding down. And we wanted to reflect on what we've learned over the past 10 years and sort of share that knowledge. And I'm sitting with three of the people that were executive directors of the Institute of Play, and I think what we're planning to do is just chat a little bit about the organization and what happened, but leave a lot of time for questions so that we can have some dialogue, and we want to be able to learn whether it's very practical questions about starting and running a nonprofit, specific questions about our programs and research and ideas. Katie, maybe you want to start by talking a little bit about the mission of the Institute of Play and how that rolled into the work. And also, why don't you also explain who you are and what you did at the Institute as well?
Oh, sure. So I'm Katie Salen. I'm currently a professor at UCI. I'm in the informatics department. I teach human-computer interaction and game design there, do research. So I was a founding executive director of Institute of Play, and I actually think Susanna did a nice job in the little abstract. So the Institute was really just started at a moment, and we have spending a lot of time in the past couple of days just as a group reflecting on the moment in which the Institute was created. It was a real cultural moment around games and learning. Games for Change came out at that same time. The book Eric and I worked on, a bunch of other books that people in this audience wrote came out. It was a time when the idea that games and learning might go together was actually really brand new, or was being rediscovered after the 60s when they thought about it, and then we forgot about it, and then we remembered it again when technology came around. And it was a time when there was a lot of excitement to say, wow, there's a way of developing games. There seems to be something very interesting both about the form, but also about the practice of game design that feels like has alignment with really good progressive education practices. There's beginning to be an emerging field of game studies, emerging learning science research that's interested in games. All of these people coming together to say, well, what might this look like? So the Institute was really born out of a moment of what if? What might be? What do we know? And it's more than 10 years later, and we actually know a lot. So I don't feel so sad about the Institute closing because in a way I feel like it was part of a cultural moment. But some of the work that we did included, we partnered with the New York Department of Education to open a school over on the west side called Quest to Learn. So it was a 6th to 12th grade public school that's still around. And the idea was to try to develop a school really from the ground up around principles of game design and play. So it wasn't a school where kids were playing games all day, but it was the whole design, games and play and design infiltrated that school. And out of that school were born many, many things. And these guys might talk about it, but a professional development initiative for educators. We ran after-school programs, summer camps. And out of that work, one mission of the Institute was try to share what we learned. So part of what we always did was develop toolkits and white papers and made those resources available on our website to sort of share. So we have a whole set of what we call design packs that were intended and really tried to design to enable other people to take up the learnings, the stuff that we're learning, to say, well, how might this make sense in your context? So that's a little bit the work that the Institute did.
Rebecca, do you want to also add something in terms of something that the Institute of Play did that you'd like people to know about and remember? And also, what did you do there and your role?
Yeah, so I'm Rebecca Rufo-Tepper. I started at the Institute working to oversee a research and design lab that we had at the Quest to Learn school called Mission Lab, which I think we'll talk about later. And then over the years, I had many different titles. I led a lot of the work we did around teacher professional development and adult learning, and then I was the co-executive director with erina for many years. And I think, in terms of what can come out of the Institute and things that people might want to know to take forward. I've been speaking a lot with people who worked at the Institute recently because of the news, and what I've noticed is that the people that worked at the Institute or worked with the Institute talk a lot about how they were shaped and changed by the work. And so one really beautiful thing is that as the Institute winds down, there's so many people that were touched by the work, which I think bring the work forward. And I think that's something that the Institute did really well. We had a lot of values around collaboration and design and play that really emerged out of what does it mean to do games and learning in an education space. And so we really tried to live the values that we did in our work. So it wasn't just about creating products and bringing them into a space for kids. It wasn't just about designing things. It was really about having a group of people that worked together and with our partners to bring those values into the work we did. So we thought a lot about not having a silver bullet. Like, we're not going to create and change every school, and this isn't the solution. Because we didn't believe there was a silver bullet for education. But what we believed was that if we worked together and we took the principles of what make games really powerful learning tools, and we thought about how do we create a culture around that with the people at the Institute and the way that we work together, that even though we wouldn't find a silver bullet, for every context that we worked in, we were able to take collaboration and design and playfulness into the work that we did to figure out what was the best solution for that system. And so I think the transformation of the adults in the communities that we worked with, I think, is a very powerful thing to think about. How do you take people who are, who've gone through a whole education system, who have a job that they do, who have a very sort of, as we all know, like, as you get older, like, you have a little bit more of a narrower space of the way that you do things. And we tried to think about how do you problematize that and tear that apart and get people to step out of their comfort zone and really do things differently. And that's something that I really think the Institute can, people can learn from that work and think about that in whatever institution you work for.
And Erina, do you want to share with us who you are, what you did at the Institute, and what you'd like people to remember about it?
Yeah. So my name's Ruth Shapiro. I worked closely with Rebecca the entire time that I was at the Institute. We worked on the curriculum at Quest to Learn. I was the co-director of Quest to Learn, and then the co-executive director of the Institute. I think for me, I'm just going to build a little bit on what Rebecca was talking about. Really, at the core of the Institute, I like to think about it a little bit as like it was a bit of a kind of incubator of talent in many different ways. And Rebecca was talking a little bit about the people who worked there and the partners that we had. Specifically, I think the most transformative power it had was the power to transform teacher practice. And when you talk about adults being narrow, oftentimes I think that the most narrow are often teachers. It's interesting, when you work with teachers. And I was a teacher, so I mean no disrespect, but there's a way that they want to do things, and they've always kind of done things a certain way, and there's a comfort in that. There's a comfort in the way that they interact with students and in the role that they play and the role that students play, and all of that is kind of set, and many teachers feel that that's the way that it should be. And I think one of the things that the Institute did so well, and I hope there will be ways for it to move forward, is when it worked with teachers, we really worked to break that down and to really encourage teachers to play and collaborate and to really think critically about making mistakes and think about how they could help students make mistakes, and all of the things that games really do well, really how could that come out in their teaching practice, to try things over and over again. And it wasn't an intended thing. Like, we really, when we thought about the school and the work that we were doing, we were very much focused on the kids and opening a school for kids where the power of play would really enable them to succeed. And I think one of the things that really came out of it that we didn't expect was that it really became a place for teachers and kids, but really for teachers to try things and play and learn from each other and collaborate. So that, I think, is very special, and it doesn't happen everywhere. And so, the more that can happen in schools, I think.
Yeah, I think just to again maybe help people appreciate what the Institute of Play did. I'm sure some people might be very familiar. For some people, you might not be that familiar. But for me, what was always special about what the organization did, and I should say that I never worked there as a staff member. We kind of spun off the Institute of Play from the commercial studio Game Lab that I co-founded with Peter Lee. That was a commercial game studio, and we ended up helping create the Institute of Play as a kind of partner organization. And Game Lab closed, the Institute of Play went on, at least until very recently. And I've been on the board of the Institute of Play, so I've been involved in that sense. But for me, what was always so interesting is a couple things. One is that I think that there are very few organizations that combined research and design in such a rigorous way. That the Institute of Play was really wanting to innovate in terms of design of experience, design of learning, but always grounded in very rigorous research as well. And I think it was very, very special kind of sauce, and that they were able to do that. And moreover, not just looking at one part of the equation, that in its mission to transform education through play, the Institute of Play designed entire schools. They designed curriculum that could be used by other people in a modular way, and they also did teacher training. And just looking at all the levels of that equation, again, there were very few organizations that were doing so much. So just to try and help people understand the scope of work. Is there anything more that we want to say before we open up for questions? Yeah, Katie.
Well, I have two quick takeaways. So one is, and I want everyone to take this in the nicest of ways. So I've been coming to this conference for years, and every year I'm still struck by the fact that a lot of people are extremely unfamiliar with the research around games and learning, or even what other people are doing, right? It's okay to come in as a new person. There is so much, we know so much. There's still a lot we don't know, but there is an empirical basis, for cognitive basis for what we know, kids when they're playing, people when they're playing, physiological evidence, social evidence. There is a lot that we know. There are also many, many beautiful examples of cool things that people built. So you have to become literate. It's not okay to not be literate. So that's my little plug. My big takeaway from the work of the Institute, and this is a structure that Rebecca oversaw and mentioned, is something called Mission Lab. So the Institute, we had huge values around kids having a voice, and that when we did collaboration, it was authentic collaboration. It wasn't us as experts coming in to do something to a school. So Mission Lab was a design studio that sat inside of the school. It was staffed with game designers from the Institute, learning scientists, and researchers. And they were in the school every day, co-designing with the kids and with the teachers. Right? So there was an original idea like, well, okay, if we're going to do design, it has to be participatory. What would this look like? So it led to very cool participatory design. Everything was collaboratively designed. But it also led to this other amazing effect of mentorship, where kids in the school saw our game designers, which were, in a way, they were like babies. They were like 21 years old, just out of school, just slightly older than these middle schoolers and high school kids. And they saw, like, oh my God, these people are interested in me. They want to make a game for me. And so the lab became quite porous with kids coming in. And so there was this really beautiful mentor kind of effect. And then the last thing is that because Mission Lab was in the school, the act of creating the curriculum was visible, and it was understood as an iterative process. So kids saw, and teachers saw, like, oh, that thing could be made in a lot of different ways. This just happens to be the experience we're having today. And almost every lesson or module or game that was designed, kids had a chance to redesign it. And it led to this very interesting mindset around learning, which was, oh, that didn't work so great for me, but I think we could change it to make it better, right? So kids and faculty, teachers working together with designers to say, oh, how could we make it better? This is amazing kinds of conversations to be having in school. So there was a real sense of empowerment, I think, that came out of that particular structure. Now, that's not a replicable structure, right? It cost us a lot of money to fund that over time. But it's more that the takeaways are this idea around doing authentic collaboration, right? You don't be the expert to fly in and sort of do something to kids. Kids have amazing abilities. You must include them in the work that you're doing. And then try to make the process visible. There's an enormous learning that happens when people can get in their hands in the mix of helping do co-design.
I think that's a great example of when I talked about how rigorous the thinking around design was. Right, and the way that design intersects research, that it's really designing the process by which the curricular interventions would be made. Erina or Rebecca, do you have another takeaway you want to add for now? We're about to open it up for questions. I just want to mention the images that are that are kind of scrolling by are, the three of them contributed images, and we were just kind of sharing. I guess there's all kinds of stuff in there, right? From the Quest to Learn school, and some of them, yeah, shots of them. They didn't necessarily put their own images in, so remain a mystery.
A lot of the kids are now graduating from college. So we just met one, came back to a little party we had last night. So that's always amazing. The little 6th graders are now graduating from college.
Well, we wanted to have this session in part so that it could be most useful to you or here at Games for Change. So what do you want to know about? What questions do you have for this amazing group? Okay, good. Lots of hands are coming up. Let's just start going around the room. Yeah.
I did one of the summer institutes and really loved it. There's been a conversation ongoing this week in Facebook about will those resources be made available now that the institute will be no more because people are hungry to get more.
Okay, so you can't hear that, right, in the back? So I'm going to repeat the question. We don't have a roaming mic. Oh, there's a mic for questions over there. Should I, production people, should I have people use that mic? Should I have people go to the mic?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so if you want to ask a question, if you don't mind, use your physical body and get in line. And then that keeps me from having to call on people. So if you could, that would be great. The question was, as someone who went to the summer training session, will the materials be made available because people are still hungry for them?
Yeah, so all of the resources from Institute of Play, everything that's been made available is now going to be housed at the Connected Learning Lab at UC Irvine. So we're not archiving, we're sort of archiving them, but they're still going to be freely available. So all that stuff is still, there's going to be, hopefully from a user perspective, no shift, no change.
Right.
I don't know about was there like a community of practice or a teacher Quest platform or anything?
In development.
Oh, but that isn't something people have had access to.
The Teacher Quest platform? I think that's still an open question.
Okay. So anyway, it should all be there.
But the materials that were available will continue to be available. So that's a great question. All right, we're going to bounce back and forth between the two. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much. My question, I didn't quite understand why the institute stops, but that was basically not the question I wanted to ask.
Also, just to say we're all at a conference to get to know each other, feel free to introduce yourselves.
Okay.
Who are you, by the way? I'll use my lab. Bron Stuckey. Thank you for that question. So yeah, feel free to introduce yourselves.
Okay, my name is Joost Razens. I'm a professor at Utrecht University in the Netherlands, and last year I was a colleague of Erik, being a visiting scholar at the NYU Game Design Lab. My question is the following. Games for Change is not only about games and play, but also about change. So I wonder, for also personal reasons, I'm, for example, interested in the International Baccalaureate system. And that started in the 1917 in Geneva as peace education. So if your kid now goes to such a school, it's about peace, it's about sustainability, is becoming responsible also for the future of the earth, etc. So until now, you focused a lot on the notion of game and play and game design, but were there also specific topics you were focusing on? For example, like sustainability or peace education or these kinds of issues.
So was there any content-based materials that are going to be available or that we focused on?
Is it the question is are they going to be available, or at the school did we focus on anything in particular?
Either.
The school, okay. Quest to Learn is a New York City public school, so there were guidelines, and I think designed on purpose to be a New York City public school, right? To be able to prove a certain amount of something can happen within a very structured context. But because of that, there were standards and content that needed to be taught based on what the New York City Department of Education mandates. But in addition to that, there was a focus on systems thinking that I think is interesting and one of the key distinguishers of the school. So really helping students understand, we used games as concrete systems that kids understood, and then really built those understandings and tried to apply them to more complex systems so that they were able to really break apart systems, put them back together, understand why systems mattered and how they could kind of make change based on systemic understanding.
Yeah, and the reason for that is the vision is to graduate students that could see the world as made up of a set of systems that in most cases have been designed, and that if something has been designed, you can change it. So the whole goal was to really empower kids to feel as if they themselves could make a difference. So systems thinking was just the way in to that, because you have to have that lens. And we chose games because games model systems beautifully. So we actually started with systems thinking. It just happened to be that games were a great fit. Play is a beautiful collaborator with design, so that's how those things came together. But the larger vision was really around empowering kids to make change.
And I just want to say, I know maybe some of us that have been working in this field for a long time say, yeah, systems thinking. So this is 2007. And the fact that systems thinking now is so deeply ingrained in all of our thinking is very much to the credit of the people that are here on stage. So just to say that that was ground that we alone didn't do, but that the Institute of Play certainly had a large part in spreading out those ideas and making them more accessible. Yeah. Feel free to introduce yourself.
I'm Stuart Criley from Indelible Learning, and I have a question. If you had a time machine and you could talk to yourselves when you were starting this institute in 2007 and you're on the stage now, what would you have told yourselves? What would you have done differently?
Anybody? Go ahead, Katie.
Oh, I don't want to keep dominating. Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, so this is going to sound, beware of funders.
Beware. Oh, have more. Did you say beware?
Beware.
Beware of funders.
Beware of funders.
Because,
I will leave it at that.
Because they're dangerous?
No, so I will say, so when we started the Institute, we were babies. I had never fundraised before. You know, we started a school, like the first project. And to do work, when you want to do work, you are happy when people want to help you out. So, but everybody that wants to help you out has an agenda, and a set of values. So luckily, we worked with a lot of funders who were very value aligned for a long time. But it's more a word of caution. We were lucky. You guys may not be so lucky. So one cautionary tale is really, I think probably we would have thought more deeply with hindsight around funding.
Do you, because this is such a juicy question, do either of you have anything that you would do differently, given the time machine going back? Or anything you want to add?
I think I would say don't try to do it all. I think at times, and this is very common, I think, for nonprofits, like you don't really articulate your mission in a very narrow way, and so you try to do a little bit of everything, and kind of at some point you got to find where you stick, and that is kind of goes with the funding, right? Like where do you stick, and like where is there funding for you to continue to be in that area? I think when you try to do too much and put your eggs in like too many baskets, you risk diluting what you're doing, and then you become like completely overwhelmed by possibilities. So some constraint around that is helpful. So
I think that's good.
Over here, yeah.
John German, I put people and projects together at the United Nations. For Katie, for people who don't know about the research, what would be your advice? How to approach this, so that they can get to that destination? And the general question about Common Core is, how did you deal with it? And would it be easier to deal with now than it was when you started? Would you have advice for people who are doing something that doesn't fit with practice in the classroom or Common Core? How should they deal with that?
Well, so the quick question around research, so there's just a ton, there's a ton of books out there. There's a library, there's just search games and learning. There's actually a bunch of books. There's also lots of research articles. So it's all, and most of them are freely available, at least all the research articles you can find online. The question, these guys might be better to answer about the Common Core.